We got another question here.
Right.
When dealing with challenges like censorship in the old days and having to create the comic book defense legal fund, you know the hurdles comics have had to overtake to get where we are today. What are the challenges of the new generation of cartoonists? Good question.
Yeah, it's different because now a lot of cartoonists, this strips online and they deal with different issues that this gets into the politically correct era.
Yeah,
When I was doing undergrounds, everything was fair game. And as a result, some of it you can look back and, I think we probably parodied some things, did some things that we might have second thoughts about now. But again, I think everything was fair game.
yeah,
And better or worse. Today, you have to be super careful when it comes to sexism, racism,
yeah,
almost everything,
yeah,
except maybe ageism.
yeah. Certainly. I think
And
I was just watching yesterday. A special came out with Dave Chappelle. I'm a big fan of his stuff. Basically because he'll say anything, and
yeah, yeah,
but and I understand that people have a problem with some of the topics that he picks. I definitely and I support people's right to take offense at it or have any kind of opinion they want, and it's the right of the artist to ignore that if they want. And I think that's sort of where he's at. But he walks a very dangerous line at
yeah.
times. And
Actually, I've been meaning to see that. So
check it out.
I,
It's on Netflix, and it's definitely.
well,
I mean,
but
along with everything else, right?
but I guess the bottom line to the questioner is, I think if you're a cartoonist and you consider yourself a satirist, and not every cartoonist is a satirist, no subject should be off limits. Some are going to be very sensitive. If you're an old white guy and you decide to tackle a topic about African Americans or women or gay people or anything outside your immediate territory, you're asking for trouble. So you better tread lightly, and it better be very fucking funny or justifiable, because you're going to be under the microscope. But I don't think they should be forbidden, and that's the key. Is
Right.
a cartoonist should be able to speak the truth as they see it, and their audience may not include 100% of the population. Let's face it. Thomas Nast in the 1870s, not everybody was happy with his cartoons either, but we look back and we go, what an amazing service Thomas Nast provided on the political front. With every generation, it's something different. I can't say, gosh, what's a 20-year-old cartoonist, supposed to do with the America they see today. And all I can say really is be true to yourself, and don't necessarily wilt if you get some criticism, because just because someone criticizes you, it doesn't mean they're right.
Right.
But you have to be able to defend what you're criticizing or commenting on or whatever, and understand you're going to not always make friends. In fact, you may make some enemies, but you have to be honest to yourself.
Yeah.
And that's it. It can be dangerous.
That notion of sincerity, I keep going back to it. It's like you have to be true to yourself. You have to be true. Like you have to tell people something that's not a complete construct. I think, if that makes any sense. Like
Yeah.
there's honesty in comics that I still don't see in any other format.
Well,
Uh,
that's partly because comics are a rare form of expression where a single person can write and draw, so that they have a stage where they're the only actor. If you want to make a movie, it's almost impossible to make a movie by yourself.
yeah.
and as soon as you start having a team, your script, your casting, everything is going to be second guessed by a team, because you're going to be with coworkers. In the case of a movie, you have a studio that's going to be sensitive to some things. You're going to have financially people who are investing in it, and they're going to be sensitive. So
Right.
your vision probably will get diluted. Whereas with a comic, for better or worse, it's you. You, me, we can say whatever we want and take
For now.
whatever Sturm and Drang follows.
Yeah.
A perfect example is Robert Crumb, who,
Sure.
for my generation, he was considered the primary guy. And he did a lot of stuff that's way over the top in terms of race and
Right.
sex.
Right.
You name it.
And you can, I think it's valid to take issue with that now and call it out. Doesn't make any of his comics less, what's the word, entertaining or funny or
No, I mean,
interesting.
I think Crumb's a genius, and I think some of his stuff is questionable in hindsight, but I know him enough. I know him well. He's not a racist. He's not inherently really even a sexist. He's actually a sweet guy, a gentle soul. But
Right.
what he has that a lot of cartoonists don't have, he has no lid on his id. He will draw and say anything as soon as it comes to mind. He doesn't self-censor. And that's hugely dangerous, because most of us have thoughts we would never dare express. And Crumb, for better or worse, expresses it all. It's like a diary that most people wouldn't see, but his diary is public.
Right.
And you can criticize him all you want, and I understand why people do. On the other hand, I think he's been castigated to the point that, I think in some ways he's expressed recently he's afraid to draw. He's afraid to come to America and be picketed.
That's terrible.
It's something that needs to be debated openly and honestly. But I think,
there's the whole. I mean, I see it from both sides in the sense that people want to finally they sort of want to call it out wherever they see it, and that's fine. But I also feel like there's really the throwing the baby out with the bathwater syndrome in a lot of it. I don't have my politics or my political views or anything. I don't have to be in sympathy with the person's book that I'm reading. I'm looking for.
So,
I don't know what a lot of times what the politics even are. Most cartoonists aren't that political, to be honest. I don't think. Some are, I suppose.
Well, you may be right. I found even back in my day, I was talking about how we were politicized, but actually the one time I tried to do an anthology of overtly political comics, I couldn't get anyone to contribute to it. And I'm a little baffled to this day. And I think it's because it just seems too strident when you're just doing overtly political work instead of subtly political work. And I think,
and actually, the politics isn't what offends people. It's the exclusionary, racism or whatever whatever sexism that angers people. I just see a lot of it as there's extremism on both sides of the spectrum, and I try to stay away from both of those.
Well,
I think
So if somebody submitted to you a beautifully drawn, beautifully written pro-Trump comic, you'd publish it?
That's I don't know. I haven't seen it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't seen.
I mean, I think you have a line you would or would not cross.
Everybody
too.
does, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has. I mean, that's to me that's a form of extremism. If you're doing a super, I don't know that I would publish a comic that was super pro Obama. I'd be more likely to do that. I don't know.
But the truth is, comics about a politician who's contemporary, they're probably generally going to be boring because it's either going to be so much in support of them that it seems like hagiography, or it's going to be so anti that person that, it's like, heard it already.
Yeah.
I think
put your finger on what's interesting,
you have, to have distance. Yeah, for me to do anything about a politician, you need some distance, and that's why I love historical comics.
Right.
And if somebody wants to do a comic on Abraham Lincoln or FDR, whatever, that to me would be far more interesting than somebody who's been in office the last decade or two, because it's almost too new.
It's too early to tell. The results are still being tabulated. I'd love to see a comic on Teddy Roosevelt. Actually, I think there is a guy that you can put as many pluses and minuses up as you want on that guy.
I think so. Yeah.
And it's all interesting. Let's see. We've got a couple more questions here. Do you have any advice for comic artists that aren't experienced on the business side of things?
Oh boy. Well,
that's a broad question, but
it is. But I would say when you're starting out, and if you're self-publishing and you're putting your comics on Instagram, or you're not dealing with a real publisher, I wouldn't worry about it too much. The problem comes when you start to deal with a real publisher and they give you a piece of paper to sign. You have to just understand in the most basic terms the legal rights that you want to maintain and the legal rights where you might want to cede it to a publisher. And it all comes down to a handful of things, mainly around copyright or the term of the rights.
Right.
And, a reasonable publisher, let's say Ted, for example. Ted's not going to say, sign this and I own your work forever. But
I'd never get away with
it. Maybe he does. But Ted, as a reasonable businessman, might say, I want the exclusive right to publish your work for X number of years, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. But in a reasonable amount of time, those rights come back to you, and those are important. What you want to be very careful about is signing something called a work for hire contract, where you are signing away your rights forever. Now, if you're working for Marvel or DC Comics, you have to do that. And that's because they own Spider-Man and they own the Hulk and so on. And if you're really going to be that kind of cartoonist, then it's always going to be work for hire. But between a Marvel deal and, a small press deal, there's a lot of gray area. So I would just say learn the basics and also understand that just because somebody pushes a piece of paper at you, it's not carved in stone. If you don't like a sentence or a paragraph or half of it, there's a way of negotiating. Right. And a reasonable publisher will reasonably negotiate. And if you say, I don't like paragraph 3 because I don't think it's fair, suggest what you think is fair. In other words, everything's negotiable. You don't have to it's not like take it or leave it, typically.
Right.
You find that happy medium. But I would just say it's easy for a lot of young artists to even sign a work for hire deal, and they say, why do I care? I'm 20-some years old, and I got a big career in front of me. But you never know. When you're 50 or 60 or 70 or 80, you might want to do a collection of your work, and then suddenly you find out that early work that you're proud of, you can't use it because you got to get permission from the XYZ company, and they won't give it to you unless you give them $500.
Right. You raised a great question about that too for me, which is, you're saying, you're 20 or however old you are, and you got a great career ahead of you. The notion of you don't know what's going to be a hit, you don't know what's going to really make a lot of money, or right. what's going to be successful just moderately or whatever, either now or down the road, because it could happen now or down the road. But have you had, your experience with? Were you surprised when the things that you did was a hit, and certain other things maybe weren't as big a hit? Like, where do you fall in terms of the surprise factor there?
Yeah, you should never assume. Never assume something you create is going to be either a flop or a big hit. Of course, nobody who's unknown probably should anticipate a big hit. But the thing is, you might create something that catches on.
Right.
And so if it catches on, you want to make sure you're in control. That's all. You know, and again, there's so many subtle layers that I can't really give specific advice, only advice to be cautious. And to most contracts, unless you get it from a big company that's deliberately using obfuscatory language, it should be simple English. And read it and make sure you understand everything. And if there's a word you don't understand, look it up. Might be significant. If there's a paragraph that you don't understand what's in there, it doesn't seem relevant to you, ask. Ask why it's relevant. A contract, you got to understand, I came from a position when I was young, I didn't trust contracts. First few years, I was publishing comics. I had no contracts with any of my artists. I had handshakes with them. I'd write letters spelling out our arrangement, but no formal contract until Will Eisner and I came into contact, and I convinced him that I should be able to reprint some of his Spirit. And he said, I'm happy to. Send me a contract. And I said, well, Mr. Eisner, I don't do contracts, but I'm happy to put it all in writing in a letter. And he said, well, that's not good enough. I need a contract because it's legally binding. And to make a long story short, I basically said, well, we do have an understanding. And he said, well, if you get hit by a bus or I get hit by a bus, our widows may not really understand what it was we agreed to. So he said, I have to have a contract or you can't publish my work. So after arguing with him about it, I finally said, look, I don't want to pay a lawyer to write up a contract. And he said, neither do I. I'll send you one of mine. So instead of the publisher, in that case, imposing a contract on the creator imposed a contract on the publisher. But it was an important lesson because what he really said to me that I'll never forget was he said, a good contract is something that's fair to both parties. He said, it's not an imposition. It's not a rip-off. It's a good contract protects both sides. And that's ultimately what it should be. So that's why read the language. If a publisher sends you something and it doesn't seem fair to you, then question it. Try to fix it. And if he's not willing to change any of it, I would say be suspicious of that publisher. And it's not just copyright issues. It might be a royalty. Maybe they send you a contract. There's actually a quite famous independent publisher who often sends contracts and they'll pay a 4% royalty. To me, that's obscene. 4%? Fuck them. You should ask for 10 minimally. And maybe you settle for 6 or 7 or 7.5. But don't sign a deal where you get a 4% royalty. They're ripping you off. But whether they let you keep your copyright or not, they might still not be treating you fairly. So read the language, understand it, and if you're young and you have no experience, talk to contemporaries who might be a little bit older, and maybe they had a good experience or bad, but they'll share it with you. So
sure,
self-educate. That's basically it.
I think that's really good advice for life as well as contracts. You know, self-educate.
Huh. Well, yeah.
Don't take anything for granted. Wow, the time flies so quickly. We've been talking now for 50 minutes, and I could talk to you for another 5 hours easily, but I don't want to impose on your time.
You said there was one other question, maybe?
Oh, well, let's see. When you were growing up and didn't have access to comics around the world like we do nowadays, where did you grab inspiration from to form your work besides comics? And then it's like films, music, books, anything in particular that you particularly, I Love Lucy, I don't know.
Well, I saw very, very few movies when I was young. My family was poor and we didn't go to the movies, so they were not really an influence. The newspaper comics were big for me.
Sure.
The comic books that I could get were big for me. And I read. I went to the library, read as many books, as I could.
When you were
But
at the library, did they have like comic like strip collections? No.
no. Well, I can tell you the first time I went to a sizable library, it was in Racine, Wisconsin, which is not a tiny town, maybe 80,000 population. I looked in the, we used to have then card files where you'd look things up alphabetically, and I could only find 2 or 3 books about comics. One was Seduction of the Innocent, of course.
Naturally.
One was by a guy named Becker. I think it was called Comics in America. And I think there was one called Comics and Their Creators that was done in the 40s. It was virtually nothing. It was a desert. I mean, very, very little, because this isn't a field that scholars took seriously at that time. And
right.
Even though comics were very popular, it wasn't until Jules Pfeiffer came along in, I think, 1966 with the great American Superheroes or something like that. That was the first like mainstream book that opened doors, and it was followed then steadily by more. But prior to the mid-60s, there was nothing. So
they didn't collect, like, I don't know, they didn't collect Little Abner. They didn't collect, Little Orphan Annie or any of those.
Nope.
Wow. That's really fascinating.
Well, they did very, very, very early on. There was a publisher called Leon and Couples back in the 1920s. They would collect those things, but they were not considered books for libraries. They were, even some had hardcovers, but they were kind of disposable hardcovers, and I never saw them in any library. Serious collectors now can find them, but
I thought that like Charles Schulz started collecting his stuff pretty quickly.
Well, yes, but in paperback book.
Oh, okay. So there's that distinction. Yeah,
not real books that would be in a library, Ted. Not hardcovers.
Just stuff that would be in a bookstore, maybe a bookshop, but not in a library.
Right.
Right. I understand. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the case. Well, I mean, with the exception of, I remember as a child. So we're maybe 10 or 15 years difference here, but and they were my favorite thing were the Charles Schulz books in the library. But yeah, there wasn't a whole hell of a lot else.
But look at the dates on those, Ted. I think you'll find
they were from the 70s.
I think they're later than you think. The first ones, when I say paperback, what I really mean is pocketbook. Is that a term that
Yeah.
The ones that were 25 cents and they were on spinner racks and they were basically as unsavory as comic books. Well, smaller than that.
Even just like little, you could stick them.
They were called pocket books because you could literally fit it in your back pocket if you were a guy. And they were 25 cents.
Right.
And they would collect comics. I mean, as early as 1959, Harvey Kurtzman did a paperback called Jungle Book.
Right.
It was original comic material for a pocketbook, but it failed miserably because it wasn't a medium, again, that people were expecting to buy satire.
That actually brings up this last book I didn't, we really didn't have time for, but I bought this before I knew you, and I remember, I'll never forget it. We were at a comic book store. We were at Time Warp, actually, and I pointed that out, and I was like, this is a good story, and I pointed out that book, and I said, that's a great book, and you said, I think so, and and I was like, yeah, did you have something to do with it? He goes, yeah, I wrote it. Are you shitting me? Like it's a true compliment, but
right.
I know we don't have time to get into it, but that's something we can talk about next time, maybe. And thanks for your questions, guys. Do you like the Archie digests? One just popped up from Roberto Martinez.
I have to say, no offense to the questioner, but I have never, ever been a fan of Archie. I always found them kind of cloying and too cute and too safe.
Yeah.
There was never to me any even slight edge about Archie, and they promoted stereotypes, I thought, and I just thought the characters were so stupid, and they were just lame gags. And also, I found out later the publishers were really,
That wasn't actually the question.
awful. Yeah,
Misinterpreted
they were
the
awful.
question.
Oh, what's the question?
The question actually was he meant for reference for the size of books, the Archie Digest.
Oh, okay.
That was my fault. That was my fault. I misinterpreted the questions. Thanks for the clarification, Roberto.
I think the last time I saw one, it's been a while. I think an Archie Digest is still larger than a pocketbook.
Still larger than a pocketbook. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
in other words, if your jeans have a back pocket, if you can fit it in your back pocket, it's a pocketbook.
Right. I guess
if it doesn't, it's a digest.
Jordan jeans. Now they have the right pocket size, but Levi's and Dockers. I'm getting way out of my element here.
Okay.
Anyway, no, that. Thank you so much. I like I said, I could keep talking with you, and I don't want to. He says he wants.
That's all right, Ted. I enjoy it. We'll do a marathon sometime till we lose our voices.
That would be really cool.
We'll lose the audience and the voice box.
That would be even cooler. But thank you for coming on, and I just wanted to say, we'll do this again next week, and if Dennis wants to take a break, I can certainly understand that. But I'm going to try to continue getting people on here to talk about comics and promoting this.
Where am I going to go? We're all under lockdown. Where am I going to go, Ted?
I know, but I don't want to create too much of an imposition on you, and you got things going on, I'm sure. But
I could be filing postcards.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's you got
as my father says,
Eisner work and filing little Abners. But,
lots of fun.
Yeah, but thanks again. Check out everybody listening. Check out the Kickstarter and tell your friends and you'll be able to watch this interview or this conversation on the Facebook page after we're done. So maybe turn people onto that, and you could do worse than to learn more about Denis Kitchen. I mean,
I didn't know you were archiving these, Ted.
How am I archiving these?
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Facebook's archiving it for me.
I thought they were alive and then they evaporated into the vapor. I didn't know you were safe.
I actually don't know how long how far back on Facebook can you go before they throw stuff away?
You're asking the wrong person. I'm not on Facebook.
I don't know. I'm going to ask. You are. Your presence is felt on Facebook. You have your page.
Well, I have a professional page that my wife Stacy maintains, and I very rarely contribute to.
Yeah.
But I don't have a personal page where I'm typing friends several times a day. No,
you have a better life than that. And
I don't know where people get the time to do it. I mean, obviously it's important for some. I get it.
There's that, and there's Instagram, and there's Twitter, and I don't get any of it. But if it's a way to reach people, I'll have. So I have all three.
Well, actually, you know what? You mentioned Instagram. Can I plug my daughter's Instagram?
Hey, yeah, you absolutely can. I'll type it into the comments section. Go ahead.
My daughter Violet is an amazing young cartoonist. She's only 22, but she's already better than me by far. She has an Instagram she just started recently, and she's been posting a lot of things. And I would suggest those of you who love comics, go join it. It's Violet Kitchen, however you find your Instagram.
So it's Violet Kitchen's Instagram.
Since I don't have anything personal to plug, I'll plug her.
All right, that sounds great. Are they working away on your new book's Kickstarter?
She and I will be beginning this summer, yes. and it'll be out hopefully next year.
All right, great. All right, so I just posted.
Okay.
Check out Violet Kitchen's Instagram.
Great. Thank
All
you.
right. No, the least I can do. It's always such a pleasure, and we'll talk some more soon. And for everybody
Certainly.
that tuned in for this, thank you very much, and
All right.
check out the Kickstarter. Thanks, guys. I'm gonna finish, but you can hang out for just a sec.
Arrivederci.